The land of the rising sun, much like Germany and the United States, has long been a global epicenter of automotive innovation and engineering. From this land came unforgettable machines that defined entire eras, like the Toyota Supra, the Subaru WRX STI, and the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution. Each one a legend in its own category. But they weren't the only machines destined to be remembered. Under the banner of another iconic brand, Japan gave the world the legendary Z series, the unmistakable Skyline, and the ferocious GTR, nicknamed Godzilla by its devoted fans. Nissan, which built its first car under the name Datsun, has spent over 8 decades crafting a legacy worthy of documentation. Because to deliver vehicles so distinct and enduring to the world, Nissan had to follow a path paved with vision, grit, and business resilience. Join us on a journey that began long before engines roared, and one that continues to leave its mark on roads around the world. Though the world knows it today as Nissan, the story of this Japanese giant didn't begin with that name, nor with a single founder. Its origin is the result of a series of mergers, shared visions, and strategic decisions, reaching back to the early years of the 20th century. And it all began with one man, Masujiro Hashimoto. Hashimoto was a young Japanese engineer who had studied in the United States thanks to a scholarship from the Ministry of Agriculture and Commerce. He specialized in a field that barely existed in Japan at the time: automotive engineering. Japan was entering the Meiji era, a nation just beginning to open up to the world. A land that still viewed machines with skepticism, but Hashimoto dreamed of something greater. Returning to his homeland in 1906, at just 31 years old, he set out to revolutionize and democratize the automobile, in a country where cars were still a luxury for the few. To gain influence, Hashimoto worked in several sectors: electrical engineering, steam engines, even weapons manufacturing. But his obsession remained unchanged: the internal combustion engine. And eventually, that dream found its allies. With the backing of 3 key investors, Kenjiro Den, a banker, Rokuro Aoyama, an industrialist, and Meitaro Takeuchi, a venture capitalist, Hashimoto founded Kwaishinsha Motor Car Works in 1911, the first step toward what would later become Nissan. 3 years later, in 1914, came their first model, the DAT, a small 10-horsepower car named after the initials of the 3 investors, DAT. Modest but robust, built not for luxury but for endurance, the DAT was the first Japanese car to be mass-produced. But while it was a milestone, sales never followed. The young company was soon forced to pivot, focusing on military truck production. Models like the Type 51 were in high demand by the Japanese Army and by a nation beginning to industrialize. Then, in 1923, the landscape changed completely. Japan was struck by one of the most devastating disasters in its history: the Great Kanto earthquake. The tragedy destroyed entire infrastructures and created an urgent need for rugged vehicles capable of transporting supplies, equipment, and rebuilding materials. Kwaishinsha seized the opportunity and merged with its competitor, Jidosha Seizo, forming a new company, DAT Jidosha Seizo Company. The merger proved highly profitable at first, but then came another blow, this time from across the ocean: the Great Depression. The global collapse hit Japan hard, and like many others, DAT was shaken to its core. By 1930, Hashimoto had already stepped down, and the struggling company, burdened with debt and declining sales, was acquired by an unlikely buyer, Tobata Casting, an iron foundry backed by the powerful business conglomerate Nihon Sangyo. Its president, Yoshisuke Aikawa, became the new face of the project, an ambitious entrepreneur with a global vision. In 1931, under his leadership, a new model was launched, the Datsun, a smaller, more affordable vehicle built for the emerging Japan. The name Datsun meant son of Dat, referring to its size, but it received pushback in the market as the word son in Japanese sounds similar to loss. In response, the name was changed a year later to Datsun, the son of Dat, referencing the national symbol of the Empire of the Rising Sun. In 1933, after acquiring a large plant in Yokohama and reorganizing its assets, the company was officially registered under a new name, Nissan Motor Company. Nissan was simply an abbreviation of its parent company, Nihon Sangyo, or Japanese Industry. And so, after decades of mergers, departures, bankruptcies, and reinventions, the Nissan brand was finally born. Aikawa was recognized as the first president and official founder, and to maintain continuity with the past, the company adopted a dual identity. Compact cars would continue to bear the Datsun name, while newer models would carry the Nissan badge. The market responded quickly. Between 1935 and 1938, Nissan released the Datsun Type 14, 15, 16, and 17 models, Japan's first mass-produced passenger cars. At the same time, Nissan supplied the military amid growing tensions with China. It became the first Japanese factory to produce more than 10,000 vehicles per year, a milestone that even Toyota would take decades to reach. But as history has shown time and time again, success is never permanent. And with the arrival of World War II, a new storm loomed over Nissan, one that would reshape the fate of Japan's entire automotive industry. When World War II broke out, Nissan, like many other Japanese companies, was absorbed into the war effort. Its Yokohama plant ceased civilian production and was transformed into a military manufacturing facility, transport vehicles, aircraft engines, and heavy machinery. Aikawa, with his sharp understanding of wartime economics, managed to position Nissan as one of the Imperial Army's key suppliers. But that association would come at a high cost. In 1945, the war ended, and the empire collapsed. The Yokohama plant was bombed, the company stood on the brink of ruin, and Aikawa was arrested by the American occupation forces. Though he was eventually released without charges, his era at Nissan had come to an end. The company was forced to reorganize, under new rules and under new leadership. Meanwhile, a parallel story was quietly beginning to unfold. Amid the post-war fuel shortages in Japan, a small company called Tokyo Electric Car Company, soon to become part of Prince Motor Company and later absorbed by Nissan, bet on a technology the world had yet to take seriously: electricity. In 1947, they launched the Tama, a modest vehicle with a top speed of just 32 kilometers per hour, but capable of traveling 100 kilometers on a single charge. Over 500 units were produced. Decades later, that humble machine would be recognized as the spiritual predecessor of the Nissan Leaf, a quiet spark that hinted at the future. Nissan's true rebirth came in 1952 with the signing of the San Francisco Peace Treaty. At last, control of the company returned to Japanese hands. But the situation remained critical, and the only way forward was to partner up. Salvation arrived from the other side of the world, the now defunct Austin Motor Company, based in the United Kingdom. Austin had worked with Nissan before the war. Now, their renewed alliance gave Nissan access to advanced automotive technology. During that partnership, which lasted until 1960, Nissan developed models like the Datsun 110 and 210, practical, reliable, and affordable vehicles. It also modernized the Nissan Patrol, a rugged off-roader born from military engineering, which soon carved out a role in the harsh terrains of Asia and South America. But one final test remained, a test that would win over investors and earn international respect. In 1958, Nissan entered the Australian Rally, the infamous mobile gas trial, 16,000 kilometers over 19 days. A brutal course designed to break both vehicles and spirits. The chosen model was the Datsun 210, nicknamed Fuji, and against all odds, it didn't just survive, it won its class. The result was historic. A year later, in 1959, Nissan opened its first assembly plant outside Japan in Taiwan. And shortly after, it made its most important leap yet, entering the US market. A market that, within just a few years, would become the most strategic in Nissan's global expansion. By the 1960s, Nissan was no longer a company surviving on borrowed licenses. It was now an independent manufacturer with its own identity, and it was ready to conquer the world. The 1960s marked the true beginning of Nissan's international takeoff. It all started with a simple but decisive model, the Datsun 510, a compact, affordable, and reliable sedan that delivered exactly what the world was beginning to crave: fuel economy and accessible performance. Thanks to its success, Nissan was now exporting to over 80 countries. From a local player, it had transformed into a global force. But if the 510 opened the door, the next model would shake the foundations of Detroit's sports car scene. In 1969, Nissan launched the Datsun 240Z, an elegant, high-performance sports car with an inline-six engine and a rebellious soul. It offered design, power, and emotion at a fraction of the cost of American muscle cars. In the United States, it became a phenomenon, and with it, the legendary Z series was born, a sports car saga that continues to this day. But Nissan's rise wasn't powered by the Z alone. On a different path, another name was beginning to make history on the racetrack, one that didn't originate within Nissan, but under a different badge, Prince Motor Company. In 1964, Prince entered a car into the Suzuka circuit, the Skyline GTS 54. No one expected much until the Skyline challenged a Porsche 904 GTS. It didn't win, but it held its own, despite massive technological disadvantages. And in this industry, that can be more valuable than gold. In 1966, Nissan absorbed Prince Motor Company, and with it inherited the Skyline. 3 years later, in 1969, a legend was born. The Skyline GTR, chassis code KPGC10, a car that fused cutting-edge technology with a racing pedigree. With multiple victories on the track, the GTR didn't just set a technical benchmark, it launched a dynasty. Beneath its hood and behind its steel, it carried the seeds of what was to come. A Tesla all-wheel drive, Super Hika's four-wheel steering, and an automotive cult that would span generations. Japanese performance had found its icon. Throughout the 1970s, Nissan continued to expand. more factories, more models, more markets. And with the arrival of the 1980s came bold new ventures. In 1984, Nismo was founded, Nissan's official motorsports and performance division. And in 1989 it launched Infiniti, its luxury brand created to challenge titans like BMW, Audi, and Daimler. But not everything was speed and growth. Expansion came at a price, and that price was about to come due with interest. Through the 1980s and 1990s, Nissan began to stumble. Unlike Toyota or Honda, its operational efficiency didn't match its reputation for reliability. Yes, the vehicles were dependable, but the internal processes were disorganized. Excess inventory, low profitability, and bloated corporate structures started draining the company's resources. And then, the perfect storm hit. Japan's economic bubble burst. The country plunged into what would later be called the Lost Decade. And Nissan, like many others, found itself trapped in its own machine. By the late 1990s, the situation was dire. The company's debt had surpassed $20 billion. Profitability was nearly non-existent, and Nissan stood on the edge, torn between pride and bankruptcy. In 1999, on the brink of financial collapse, Nissan did what it had always done to survive. It formed an alliance. But this time, the partner wasn't Japanese. It was European. Renault, the historic French automaker, acquired 44% of Nissan, while the Japanese company took a 15% stake in Renault. Thus began one of the largest automotive alliances in the world. And with it came a name that would define Nissan's modern history, Carlos Ghosn. A star executive at Renault, Ghosn was appointed CEO of Nissan. Known for his ability to carry out drastic restructurings, he implemented an ambitious turnaround strategy, the Nissan Revival Plan. Factories were shut down, over 21,000 employees laid off, assets sold, costs slashed. It was tough, it was controversial, but it worked. In just 3 years, Nissan returned to profitability. The company became a global case study in business schools, and Carlos Ghosn, a symbol of corporate efficiency. Under his leadership, volume-driven models like the Altima and the newly launched X-Trail were strengthened. Years later, under his strategic direction, Nissan introduced the Rogue Sport, known in many countries as the Qashqai, which helped create the compact crossover segment and became a global success. In 2016, the alliance expanded further. Nissan acquired a 34% stake in Mitsubishi Motors, rescuing it from the edge of bankruptcy. The Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi alliance had become a global powerhouse. They shared technologies, platforms, global strategies. A multinational giant that, at its peak, produced more vehicles than any other automaker in the world. But every empire has its cracks, and in 2018 everything changed. Carlos Ghosn was arrested in Japan. The charges: financial misconduct, tax evasion, abuse of power. His fall was as swift as his rise. After his detention, and later, his dramatic escape to Lebanon, Nissan was left in turmoil. A leadership vacuum, internal crisis, and a deep sense of institutional mistrust. Sales declined. The brand's image took a hit, and then came another global shock: the COVID-19 pandemic. To respond to the crisis, Nissan launched a new initiative, Nissan Next. Under the leadership of new CEO Makoto Uchida, a survival roadmap was drawn: shut down unprofitable plants, Reduce global production capacity by 20%. Focus on key markets and high-margin models. Less volume, more precision. In the post-pandemic era, Nissan seeks to reinvent itself once again, this time by betting on electrification. Today, the company employs around 135,000 people, aiming to recover its full operational strength after 2020. And while the path has been complex, Nissan remains one of Japan's big three automakers, alongside Toyota and Honda. It has a presence in more than 160 countries, and as of 2024, maintained a market capitalization of over $13 billion. And so, we conclude the story of the Automotive brand from the land of the rising sun. A company officially founded in 1933, but whose roots trace back to the dream of a single man, Masujiro Hashimoto, the visionary who believed Japan could build its own automotive industry. If you're a Nissan fan or passionate about the world of cars, let us know in the comments below. And if this story captivated you, perhaps you'll want to discover how a humble loom workshop went on to build the greatest automotive empire on Earth, Toyota. We'll see you in the next video.